I had gathered up to 8 notebooks of signs and dreams that were occurring to different people. And I knew without a doubt, no matter what anybody would say to me, this was my son. And he was letting us know that he wasn't far and our loved ones aren't. That much I've learned.
Welcome to Soul Explorers with your hosts, Gary Langley and Sally Taylor. Welcome to another edition of Soul Explorers. Today we have Carol Morgan with us. Carol has a fascinating story. She also has a book, Flying High in Spirit, a young snowboarder's account of his ride through heaven. I'm going to let Carol tell you more about it. But Carol, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Gary and Sally, for having me on. I'm thrilled to be here.
We're so excited to talk to you today.
Well, tell us a little bit about what happened and how your communication with your son started.
Well, first of all, I think what I'm going to tell everyone is kind of about myself. So they kind of have a background of what I was like, certainly before this all started. I was born and raised in Minnesota, and I was brought up very strict Catholic. I went to all private Catholic schools through pretty much my grade school and high school. But then in college, I did go to the University of Minnesota and graduated as a physical therapist. I worked as a physical therapist for 40 years in a hospital, acute hospital rehab setting, and worked a lot with neurological disabilities and prosthetics. What I think is interesting to know is that not only was I brought up very strict Catholic, with that being the only thing I knew about the spiritual world or life or whatever, I was also pretty science-based because of my profession. I mean, my schooling had a lot to do with science. So those were the two things in my growing up period. And after that, makes this all quite interesting to me, actually. I got married out of college, and I have 2 beautiful sons, Mikey and Joey. And Mikey and Joey were and still are wonderful sons, very loving and kind, outgoing, like to have fun. My oldest son is Mikey. He was big into sports and ultimately took up snowboarding when he was in high school and ended up being out in Colorado. He went to college at Colorado State University and was in the business school there. And he also, while he was there, he worked at a local restaurant, bar, music place that was very popular with the college kids in Fort Collins. It was called Washington's. And I actually don't know that place exists anymore, but it was a very fun place that he liked. And he begged and begged to be the DJ there, and ultimately was a quite popular DJ in his college years there. And during that time, what was interesting with Mikey was he was playing songs that were about peace, love, and unity and kindness and stuff like that, which was interesting to me. And he would say, Mom, listen to the words. You got to listen to the words of the song. You're always dancing around, but listen to the words because there's great messages in music. During his college years, well, let's see, he made it through to the beginning of his junior year. That's when the accident occurred that took his life, when he transitioned back to heaven or the afterlife, whichever people prefer to call it. He was in a fluke accident in the Colorado Rocky Mountains with friends. He was a passenger, and they were in a vehicle that hit a boulder on the side of a trail. which pitched the truck a little bit and caused the vehicle to roll. Mikey was killed instantly, and everybody else pretty much walked away from the accident with minimal injuries. There was no cell service up there, and the kids were frantic. It was very traumatic for the kids, I know. We found out by a police officer, paramedic, and a minister coming to our door very early in the morning of the following day, because the accident occurred more in the evening in Colorado. And to get this news about Mikey for all of us, for myself, Mikey's dad, and Joey, his younger brother, was beyond devastation. I will say, I think the loss of a child is the worst thing a parent can go through. It was excruciating pain and grief for us. But I think what's important to know is that even we initially got wrong information of how the accident occurred. And even with the wrong information, we never blamed anybody. In our terrible, gut-wrenching pain and grief, we never blamed any of Mikey's friends, and we never blamed God. And I do think that's an important piece to what unfolded after. So people were pouring into our home once they got the news, and we had an open door policy. Anybody could come. We just needed the support. I remember falling to my knees when I first got the news, screaming to God to help me, to help us all. And the outpouring of love and support from all the people was huge. I knew that was God working. So when this all is going on, almost immediately, we were getting signs that Mikey really wasn't that far. And I knew it was him. I was a huge believer in signs and dreams because prior to this, I had lost a dear friend from high school from breast cancer. And I swear there were things that were happening around me that was her. And so I knew this was possible. And a close friend told us, write down these things that happened to you because they're going to come fast and furious because Mikey will let you know that he's okay. Well, it wasn't just with us that this was occurring. It was with friends and family all over the place. And so I would continue to journal things. Anytime someone called me with a sign they wanted to tell me or a dream that they had, I would write it down. And the emails, I would save the emails, and dishes were coming out of the dishwasher with hearts kind of on the bowl. And my coffee cup at work would stain with a heart at the bottom of the cup. And it just went on. And I would ask Mikey questions, and the next song that would play on the radio would give me an answer to what I just asked. It was unbelievable to me. And I knew with my whole heart and soul that this was him. I had gathered up to 8 notebooks of signs and dreams that were occurring to different people. And I knew without a doubt, no matter what anybody would say to me, this was my son. And he was letting us know that he wasn't far and our loved ones aren't. That much I've learned. As I continued on my journey, and everybody's grief journey is different, I did everything I could do to help myself. And I became very involved with Compassionate Friends, which connected me to Mitch Carmody, who I still think is a national speaker for Compassionate Friends. And he was huge in talking about signs and dreams. And so when I would go to his little meeting, and he'd ask if anybody had a sign or dream to share, I would be jumping up and down wanting to be picked so I could talk about one of my signs with the rest of the group, because I knew and felt that it gives hope. And if you can have hope, it's huge to lift your spirits and your energy, which is ultimately really important for communication, which I didn't know I had at that point. Through Mitch Carmody, I got connected with Sally Baldwin, who is a spiritual medium from Florida. She was recruiting for moms all over the United States to see if we met with her, that if us being able to communicate with our children some, if that would help soften our grief. And it was an all-expense paid retreat through a donation that a gal gave to Sally to do this. And I felt Mitch Carmody said, you've got to do this. Your stories, your signs are just incredible. And so I did. I applied to this retreat, and I was one of 7 moms in the United States picked to go to this retreat. I went to the retreat and I met Sally Baldwin, who no longer is on the planet. She transitioned probably, I think it was a little over 2 years after I met her. So my window of meeting her was very slim. And she talked to all of us moms, and then she met with each of us individually. And she sat me down and she said, Carol, your son was persistent to get you here. Mikey pushed and pushed for you to be picked. And she said the fact, too, that you were just so all forgiving after the accident with that and your strong connection you have to Mikey, she says, I know you have the ability to communicate with him, and I'm going to show you how. Well, I looked at Sally and I said, you're crazy. That's impossible. There's no way that could be. And she said, I promise you that by the time you leave this retreat, and it was a 5-day, 4-night retreat. She said, I will show you, and you will have the ability to communicate with your son. And I could. When I came home, I could communicate with my son, Mikey, who had passed, and it was a miracle. It was an absolute miracle for me. I was very fearful of the whole median thing in the first place, but prior to even going to the retreat, I met with a relative of mine who was a Catholic nun, asking her if she thought it was bad that I was doing that. I said, I thought this would be against the church and what would happen to me. And she said, you're fine. You need to go. This is happening to you for a reason. And don't worry. She said, I even went to see John Edwards once when he was at the center in St. Paul. And so I thought, what the heck? If a Catholic nun can do that, I can do this retreat. And here I am today. And from my communications with my son, I worked very hard with the pendulum. Sally Baldwin used a pendulum. And for me, seeing was believing, because the pendulum worked very well. It moved very precisely right away with Mikey. I used this little number letter disc with the pendulum. I asked for God's protection. I envision myself in love and light. I go through a little ritual that I do when I call Mikey in, and I started to communicate with him this way. I hear him telepathically. I practice my telepathic skills for years. I mean, I've been doing this now. Boy, I've been doing this, it's over 13, 14 years, I think I've been doing this. And so I've really got my skills down well. I practiced a lot to do this. And I ended up being discovered by Roberta Grimes with this at a Afterlife conference. And I was on afterlifeforums.com with her for years and answered numerous questions that people would ask me from all over the world to ask Mikey. I would get the question, answer it, and then type it on the computer to give it back to them. And that is how it kind of all started. I couldn't make up the answers if I tried. I have no afterlife research background. The only background I have is being Catholic and being brought up quite strict Catholic, I might add, which was fire and brimstone, and pretty much you're going to hell if you weren't perfect, to finding out a whole different deal with Mikey. And with those questions that came through the forum, I wrote his book that he wanted me to write, and many people did. It's the Flying High in Spirit book. It's written in first person. It is Mikey's voice. It took me a long time to do that book, but honestly, it's a book about love and hope, the importance of positive, loving energy. And he actually touches on the reason why we're here on Earth. And it's really an interesting read, I'll have to say.
So, Carol, when you started hearing him clairaudiently, as they call it, you didn't quite trust that, but you had a pretty strong basis with the pendulum. So you would check, right? You would check.
Correct.
You were getting clairaudiently hearing Mikey with the pendulum because you already had a basis with that.
Right. But honestly, Gary, I heard his voice before I even learned the pendulum, but I thought it was my imagination. I thought, I'm grieving so much. I'm imagining that I'm hearing his voice. And one example of that was for a Thanksgiving dinner. I want to say it was like a year and a half after his accident. He told me in my head, Mom, for the Thanksgiving prayer, I want you to play my favorite song, Love Generation by Bob Sinclair, as the prayer before the family dinner. Now, we used to do just huge Thanksgiving gatherings. So at the dinner, and I thought people are going to think I'm crazy, but whatever, I said, this is going to sound crazy, but I swear Mikey's voice told me that I'm supposed to play his favorite song as the prayer today. So that's what I'm going to do. And I handed out the lyrics to that song. That was Mikey's signature song as a DJ, Love Generation. He wanted people to be the love generation, peace and love to everybody you meet. And so that was the prayer that day. And it really was powerful. So even back then, Gary, I could hear him, but I didn't know for sure if it really was him. So when I used the pendulum with Sally and I could see it move, it moves crazy. It just moves precisely. And he would spell out things on the letter disc and everything. I thought, wow. Seeing is believing. I needed that for myself to validate what was going on. And I think Mikey knew that. And that's why he went to Sally in the first place.
He wanted to make that connection. So,
yes.
So that you would trust what you were hearing from him.
I would trust because Sally was the only, my husband and I went to see 2 or 3 different mediums before I met Sally. They did not use a pendulum. They'd have like vision, or they would see something. I don't know what you call that. None of them used a pendulum. And so with Sally, when she did, I was fascinated by it, how it moved, with energy. And Mikey tells me, everything's energy. It's all about energy. And really, at the end of the day, it's all about loving energy. It's all about love. We're really, that's the big message he has pushed from day one is it's all about love. It's really all about love and kindness and not judging others, really. That's why we're here.
So, Carol, I have a question for you. One of the things that I hear the most from people who are grieving is that they don't think that they're receiving any signs or any symbols or any communication. What do you tell to people with regard to learning to be very open and accepting of the things that do come so that they can actually have a sense that they can continue to have that relationship?
My biggest thing, Sally, is I tell people doubt shuts the door, I feel. Okay. When they transition, Mikey tells me they're of a higher vibration now than we are in this earthly dimension. So for them to reach us, it's easier for them to reach us if we try to lift our spirits or try not to be negative. And doubt, it can be a negative emotion. And of course, grief and anger and blame also are very low vibrating emotions. And so I know it's hard. I've been there in those gut wrenching, raw stages of grief. How do you lift your spirits, right? How do you try to be hopeful? And look for the subtle things because it's amazing what they can do. And Mikey describes a lot in the book on how they actually can do this because they are in a dimension that is not under the rules of time. And so Mikey goes into a lot of detail about how they can communicate with us through signs, whether it's a bird, butterfly, dragonfly. If you think something is a coincidence, chances are it's not. And so you don't want to doubt that. Mikey tells me we can literally put thoughts in somebody's head to say something to you. So I remember having it where someone would say something to me. I'm like, my gosh, that's exactly what Mikey would say to me. Well, where did that come from? If I never met the person before and they come up with some of this stuff. So you don't want to doubt. And my other thing too is when, people would say to me, oh, it's your imagination. It's your grief. That's not really real. And I'm like, listen, I would get mad then and I'd come out with my 8 notebooks and I'd take them out and I'd slam them on the kitchen island and I'd say, okay, you can't tell me this is all a coincidence. This is not a coincidence when it's occurring this much. No. And I said, it's not just me, it's other people. And Mikey said, they will go to others to help soften our grief. So ultimately, then it's easier for them to communicate with us who are in the deep grief stages. So if someone tells you that they felt they got a sign or they got a dream from this loved one who has passed, take it for what it's worth, because I'm telling you, it is from that loved one. And they are communicating with anybody they can reach easier until we can soften our grief a little bit. That's usually what I say, Sally.
Yeah, and I agree with you 100% on that. And I love the fact that you've got 8 notebooks. That's a lot of weight of evidence, right?
It's a lot of weight of evidence. And then I bring out my coffee cup and I bring out the bowl with the heart on it. And I bring out different stuff. I've got some great orb pictures. But it's not just us. It's not just Mikey's immediate family. He was bombarding people. And I truly feel, Sally, we all have the ability to connect in one way, fashion, or form. We may not all use a pendulum or whatever, or hear telepathically, but there's other ways. And sometimes you can feel them. Like I will say to somebody, well, I just feel like they're in the room with us. I can feel you tingle all over, with their energy. And it's real. So it's really important. And I know I have gotten, it's an emotional scale, which talks about how our emotions vary with vibration. And I actually look at that. It's pasted on my mirror in my bathroom. When I get up in the morning, I like to look at that because I always want to try to keep myself in a positive mindset. And of course, that's easier for me now because I'm, 16 years out as a grieving parent. But it really does help. And you want to be with people that are positive and loving and help make you feel better and good, because negativity just pulls everybody down, and then it's harder for us to be reached.
I agree. And, Carol, I'm so inspired by you. I love your energy. And I find it so wonderful that you really didn't know anything about this. And now I've read Mikey's book a couple of times. And I say Mikey's book, you certainly had a big hand in it. The information is so right on with everything I study, with everything I've looked at for decades. And yet you knew none of this. You really didn't know anything about it. You had a Catholic background. I'm sorry for you for that. But
it is what it is.
You had to undo some of what you had been taught. You had to let go and trust. And I think that and it shines through you, that love and light. So, but I'm very inspired by the book. Even though I know the information, I refer back to it every now and then because it's inspiring. I think everybody should read this book. So,
well, this is what I tell people, read it. I hope you enjoy it. If you don't believe it, that's okay. I mean, I honestly will say, until we get there, we don't know for sure. But however, having said that, there's stuff in there is no way I could make this up. So, it was so over my head. And I would always say to Roberta and different people, this is what he tells me. I don't know what he's talking about. I don't know what consciousness, dimensions, and all these words he used to use. I'm like, well, I thought, the angels are up in the clouds and they're dusting them off with their duster. My whole concept of this was so different. And I thought, God was a man that sits in a chair. Well, Mikey's like, Mom, God is far greater than that. He says God is the source, the unity of everything that exists. God is unconditional love, and we're all part of God. And it's interesting. And Mikey also did tell me, that religion, again, nothing's wrong with religion as long as you don't judge others and whatever. But unfortunately, there's a lot of judgment and power and control involved in certain religions. It's about love. Yeah. It's really all about love. That's all. And it's, it's made me a whole different person. Yeah. The toughest thing I have experienced in my life has probably made me the best I could ever be. And I have Mikey to thank for that. And honestly, my relationship has gone with Mikey from where he was physically here to now he literally is on my right shoulder when I call for him. And he's closer to me than he's ever been, really, but I can't see him. I always throw it out there, hey, Mikey, maybe you could give Mom a quick vision just for, just for the fun of it. But I haven't had that, but that's okay. I'm doing fine.
That also takes a lot of energy on their part to do.
Yes.
Even communicating with this dense, slower realm, we have to bring our energy up. And what you said is so true. If we're in a positive state, we're more open to the communication.
Correct.
Unfortunately, our society has taught us to be focused on material things and outward, and we need to be still and quiet and listen. And that's when you hear, your loved ones speak to you. So, yeah, you're absolutely right with that. Absolutely correct.
If you hear a voice in your head, take it for what it's worth. I mean, it's not your imagination. I don't feel. I mean, it's amazing what goes on when you pay attention and you're open to it. It's amazing.
Right.
In your story, Mikey talks about the fact that he came back for this final incarnation here on the physical world so that he would have this opportunity with you here now. Did you notice anything about him when he was a kid, in addition to sort of his love of music and the meaning of the words and the lyrics? Were there any other little details about him as a kid that made you go, this one's just a little bit extra special?
He always wanted to please mom and dad. He really did. He did not want to upset the apple cart, so to speak. And he was a good boy. I mean, both my boys are really good boys. They didn't fight really. They got along great. We all got along really well. He had so many friends, everybody loved him, and he had amazing auburn hair. And, the one thing I would say about him too is, he had a couple incidences with friends in high school where he really was forgiving for something that I think the average teenager wouldn't have been so easy to forgive. And that was interesting to me about him. The other thing with him, though, too, was if he felt someone was being negative or hurtful, he would just kind of walk away from that. You know what I mean? He would be done from that. He wouldn't get sucked into negativity. And even with sports, when he didn't make a certain team, he was busy going to the next thing. And that's really how the whole snowboarding thing started. And he would help his friends out. He'd be giving rides to friends, and he was a good kid.
He was making the best of the time that he was going to be here.
Yes. And the music thing really came as he was more into college, though even in high school, he was getting into the lyrics of music. And the one thing I will say about his book, there's several numerous songs in the book that you really want to listen to because, boy, the messages, I'm telling you, he was huge into that. And
one of my favorite songs, "Love Is My Religion."
Oh my gosh. Yes. Yes.
That says it.
I mean, in that song, that Gary came after, and there was the craziest sign with this song. So that song was actually discovered by his younger brother, Joey. This was after Mikey had transitioned. So we were out in Colorado. This was after the accident. And Joey's playing the song. And then Mikey tells me with the Pendulum, this is after I was communicating, Mom, tell Joey I want to hear it again. I want him to hear the song. I want him to play the song, Love Is My Religion, again and again and again. Wow. Joey's like, this is ridiculous, Mom. I don't want to play it anymore. So we go out. Joey and I went to get a coffee up at the little the village. This was in Copper Mountain where Mikey loved to snowboard. And we're walking by the Super B lift. What song? Now, I'm telling you, Gary, this was crazy. The song Love Is My Religion starts playing at the Super B lift. As we walked by, Joey and I looked at each other and just burst out laughing because it's like, I mean, we already listened to the song, I don't know how many times in the condo. And Mikey had it playing again when we walked by the Super B lift. And that was a song by Ziggy Marley, I believe, that really wasn't popular at that point. I mean, and it certainly wouldn't be playing in Colorado. That's more of a song that you'd hear in Mexico. I mean, it was hilarious.
So Mikey kind of tells you now that he didn't really plan to be incarnate on the planet for a long time. It wasn't his mission.
Well, he has told me he's not coming back, is what he has told me. Now, I've been told that you come with a plan. You come with a general life plan with a a few key experiences. And of course, Mikey's transition and us communicating was one of those experiences. Apparently, we planned this before we came. I can't even imagine agreeing to this myself, but here I am. And now he has said then that he hadn't been here for a long time, but I didn't know this, of course, until after he transitioned and I was communicating. So the whole past life thing, I mean, Gary, I never believed in reincarnation either. So Mikey's dad did, but I never did. And so that whole concept was, crazy to me. So
I
no,
have
I
my,
believe it.
I have my suspicions about it. I think it's not like most people think it is, but it probably does happen in some degree. Reincarnation.
I know we don't come back as a grasshopper. I mean, people will ask me, well, do I come back as a grasshopper or a bug or a bunny? Or I know it's not that. But you know what, Gary, this is my thing. I worked as a physical therapist with neurological disabilities. And I would have patients come in power wheelchairs that were born with these severe disabilities. And even before Mikey's accident, I would think to myself, wow, they either drew the short straw or there's more to life than we know it. And that's when I thought, if we're only here once, life is way too unfair. So I can't imagine a loving God having that just be a one-time shot, unless of course they come and their role is to teach the rest of us. Because I'll tell you what, I learned a lot from my patients about dignity and grace with disability. Let me tell you, they're amazing. A lot of these souls that are in these bodies that they're using here are amazing.
Yeah. Oh, well, I think kind of what I meant by that was that we don't come back as Sally or Carol or Gary,
No.
but some aspect of our greater self may
right. We have our, Mikey calls it our higher self, that he calls it our suitcase of knowledge that stays in the afterlife until we return and join in with all that. We're energy. I mean, I definitely know I've been here more than once as a human, and he says we take on different roles for different lessons. Mikey always tells me, and I do believe this, you learn best by experience. You have to experience something to really learn from something and know. I mean, I've had people say to me, oh, I know what it's like to go through the loss of a child. My pet died a year ago, or my mom passed a year ago, or my uncle. Well, loss is loss. And I always say that grief correlates with how much you love something. But as a parent, unless you've gone through the loss of a child, you really don't have a clue of the gut-wrenching pain that's involved. So that's just an example of how experiencing something really is a good teacher. And we can learn a lot by what we experience.
Unfortunately for us, it is the hardest lessons that have the greatest learning. So
Correct.
I think anybody that comes in to experience something like the transition of a child, or deep poverty and some of the trauma that comes with that, or a body that's not functioning fully, to full capacity, those are souls coming in knowing that they're going to be working on big shifts, because the challenges that go along with them that create those shifts are equally large. I congratulate you on being able to turn your experience with your son transitioning back to spirit into something that is so positive and so helpful for so many other people who are undergoing a similar experience. So,
Sally, I worked really hard at it. I did anything and everything I could to help myself. And after I learned what I've learned, my mission was I want to help others that were in my situation, that were so hurt by this loss. And I refused to let grief win and overtake me for the rest of my life, because it can. Grief can literally ruin you for the rest of your life. Our loved ones who have passed don't want that. They're pounding on us, trying to get our attention with signs and dreams and different things. They want us to still live our life. And my other thing was for my other son. I had to pull it together for Joey. It's not fair to him that I would have just gone in the pits. So, I mean, I have my moments. I still sometimes have my moments, because I'm human.
Oh, sure.
But I've come a long way. I've come a very long way, and I just want to help others so that their grief can be softened. It's important to me.
Does Mikey feel that sort of the veil is thinning, that more people are getting communications from their loved ones in spirit?
He does, I think, in that regard, for sure. And, the other thing, too, what I've noticed, Gary, is religion, the younger generation, they're seeing some of the hypocrisy and stuff with some of the religious beliefs, and they want a different answer. They're searching for something else.
Yeah.
And I think that's why these kind of podcasts and oh god, there's just movies and all kinds of different shows now kind of about this concept, and it is slowly opening up people's minds a little more, I feel. And I think it's a good thing.
Yeah. I didn't mean to imply religions are bad. There's a
No,
place.
I don't either. Because they're not. I mean, I don't care what people do or use to help themselves or whatever, as long as they keep love and are positive and don't ridicule others if they don't believe what you believe. I'm all for it. Whatever works for people, just be nice.
This was Jesus's whole message.
Yes.
In a nutshell. And if people would just take that and live as the example he set, because
exactly,
he didn't, I don't think from my studies, he wanted to be worshiped as a savior. He was a wayshower.
Right. You basically, I mean, Mikey says the same exact thing as Jesus said, Can you live with love and kindness and not judge others and, be more humble with your ways? Don't be all hung up in the glamour and the glitz and the Jesus. What I always tell people, people say, well, Jesus is my savior, so therefore I'm good. And I'm like, well, I said, I think you need to walk the walk. You need to, in your actions, try to incorporate what Jesus taught, because ultimately that's what gives spiritual growth. And Mikey will say that over and over. Just saying Jesus is your savior doesn't cut the mustard, Mom. He says you got to walk the walk. You need to live what Jesus taught. And Jesus wasn't the only one who taught things like that. So did Buddha, and Gandhi wasn't bad either. I mean, there's been some big, powerful souls that have come here trying to teach the same thing.
And that takes us to one of the questions we had for Mikey that we kind of posed to you ahead of time. He, of course, came knowing that he would go home early so that he could then communicate through you and with you in order to help us out in our progression here. There obviously has been some concern about how mankind has been doing. So how does Mikey think we're doing at this point? Where can we improve? What can we do to continue to help this progression?
I asked him this half hour before I came on this podcast. And I said, how do you think we're doing as a whole, the earth, the world? He said, fair. And he says, there's still so much hate and anger and people who are into power and control of others. And he said, but also there is good too. I mean, even doing any little thing good is important. Mikey tells me that for us individually, he says, start with yourselves. If you can be positive and just be kind to people that you encounter, open a door for someone and help them in if they need it. Just being nice. He says, you wouldn't believe, Mom, how that can go a long way. He goes, it's about positive energy. Positive energy is a higher vibration. Negative energy is a low vibration, and you can feel it. And so, you can walk into a place where it's just like, whoa, it can be a very negative place. You can feel the heaviness of the energy. Or you can walk into a place where everybody's all excited and it feels uplifting and fun. And of course, all the killing and the wars and it's not good. And of course, it's at such a magnitude that us as individuals really can't do much about it, except Mikey says, start with yourselves, try to start with yourselves, because he says there's always a trickle effect when you're positive to others. Then hopefully they'll learn by your example, and then they'll do the same, and it will continue on. So he says it's about love and kindness, really. It's really important.
If we're shining that light, it affects others, even in ways that we don't know.
Correct. That is correct.
I know if I'm having a day where I'm feeling really high vibration and I go to the supermarket, people just sort of kind of just look at you and smile. They can't help it.
Right.
Yeah. And to be there all the time is the goal.
That's right. I try, of course, and we're humans. Some days we feel more down than others, but boy, I really try hard to stay upbeat. And I'm a huge, I always was this way. And Mikey would laugh at me because I was always dancing around because I would play music. And I continue to do that today. I love music. I play music all the time. I'm not a big news watcher. I don't like to watch the news because it's sad and depressing. So instead, I play music and I like to dance and stuff. And so that helps uplift me. It makes me feel better and makes me happy. And there's a trickle effect when you're positive. It trickles out and people are attracted to that. People like to be around you when you're happy and having fun. One of the most important things you can do is have fun.
Yes, I believe that this life is about enjoying it, is a big part of it. Does Mikey feel that the more people that come to this point of higher vibration will reach ultimately a tipping point where that becomes the norm? We see the futility of war. And does Mikey want people to really know that life continues, because that's the end of fear? And
correct.
The root of all fear is the fear of oblivion, of nothing after this life.
Right. So in regards to the first part of that question, as far as the two, I've never asked him that question. However, the other part of that question in regards to fear and everything, fear is really a negative vibration. And unfortunately, society, movies, even when they tell the news, they play songs or the background music instills fear in us. And it's not good, because Mikey says, really, we don't have anything to fear when we transition. Think about, Gary, if people actually knew, hey, there's nothing to fear. It doesn't hurt when you die. You're going to be wrapped in love and light. It's a learning time when you transition. You're not going to go to a burning hell for eternity. If people knew this, I think it would help them. And so instead, fear just instills, I don't know. I think that's part of where blame comes too. And just all these things stem out of fear. That's why I wish people would just listen to some of this kind of stuff more, because it really is a positive, hopeful thing. I mean, hope, you just don't want to destroy hope, because hope gives us something to reach for, I guess. And I am beyond believing. I can honestly say I know without a doubt that life is eternal. We got nothing to fear, and we will see all our loved ones who have transitioned before us. And it's going to be one heck of a party when we get there. I just know it. I just know it.
You'll find me in the afterlife. I'll be the one walking down a trail with several dogs and cats behind me.
Well, I'll have a herd of animals too. Plus, I'm going to have a disco ball at my party, because I told Mikey I want a 70s and 80s party. It's got to be disco when I get there. And I'll have to have my kayak in a river floating down the middle of the dance floor too, I guess.
And he'll be the DJ.
Mikey can be the DJ.
Yes.
Oh, for sure.
Would that be an ideal party or what?
I mean, I kind of envision what it'll be like one day, and it's just going to be heaven on steroids, I'm sure, Gary.
And
I'm sure.
All of our imagining about it, because we're set in a physical world that's very much a slower vibration, which is what this physical body is. Even our imaginings can't encompass how wonderful it's going to be. Even our imagination can't really grasp. But I agree with you. If you look into this material, if you follow all of the teachings that are out there, take a look at everything, you come to a place where it's no longer a belief. A belief in an afterlife is one thing. Mm-hmm. Knowing there's an afterlife is a completely different thing.
Yes, it is. Yes. I mean, a belief is a thought you keep thinking, but when you know, you just know.
Yep.
And I know. I just know.
That knowing comes from experiences that basically become the weight of evidence that gets you beyond belief.
That is correct. I have had so many experiences now that I just know. I just know. And Mikey tells me, Mom, we come to Earth to progress ourselves spiritually, because he says, the afterlife is just infinite with the dimensions. And he says, we come here because he says, this is our school, or one of our schools. And he says, and this is one tough school, because on Earth, we deal with negativity, we deal with materialism, society influences, and the list goes on. And it's hard. And then we're dealing with egos here. And so in the afterlife, we don't have all of that. And so he says, we learn best when we're here. And he says, we can really advance ourselves well spiritually by how we do here with what we're thrown. And so he always tells me, he says, the higher our vibration, the more we progress ourselves spiritually, the more elaborate our reality is in the afterlife. He also tells me that things are solid there just like they're solid here, which is a hard thing for me to wrap my head around. But he says, Mom, it's real, So he said, our true home is heaven, the afterlife. He says, it's not Earth. He says, this is temporary. He says, we're spiritual beings having a physical experience. Our bodies is just strictly the vehicle that we use as a soul while we're here.
As Joel Goldsmith put it, a human lifetime is a parenthesis in eternity.
Correct.
It's only a blink.
It's only a blink, which, man, it seems long when you're here, though, doesn't it?
Sure does. And
oh, gosh.
It can be the school of hard knocks, like you said.
Yes, it is. It's tough here. It's not easy here. There's no question about that.
Don't know anybody that's had a totally easy life. There's always challenges. But my biggest challenges have been my biggest growth.
Oh, for me too. Absolutely. The toughest stuff I've been thrown has been what has made me where I am today. There's no question about it. I agree.
Carol, thank you to you and Mikey for all that you're doing with sharing your story and sharing the high level information that Mikey is able to bring through to you. And I really hope that a lot of people will take a look at your book and see what more is there, because there's certainly a lot more than we can talk about in this short period of time. But is there any final thing that you think Mikey would typically share with a group like this before we call it done for the day?
Well, I know Mikey's all about love and positive energy. And honestly, I think what a great world it would be if everybody was just nice. Can you imagine how great the world would be? So I know Mikey's big thing is show some love and kindness. Let's be nice. The holidays are here. It's amazing what happens when we're kind to others, because it can grow. It reaches out, it spreads, it's good juju. And I know Mikey, that's his thing. And of course his big thing was Be the Love Generation, which was his favorite song. And think about if everybody was the love generation. It'd be a great place here.
I just want to add, I would say for the modern day books on this subject, Flying High in Spirit, a young snowboarder's account of his ride through heaven. And Mikey still, on occasion, finds a plane where he can go snowboarding. And
that's right.
The book, you should actually read this book. It's in my top 10 list of books if you want a crash course of spiritual information on what's really important without any dogma, without any shoulds and shouldn'ts. This is the book to read. And Carol, so great having you here. Absolutely love your energy, your spirit. We can feel Mikey here too. I'm quite certain he's been here through this talk. And thank you both for being here today.
Thank you so much, Gary and Sally, for having us today. Really appreciate it. It was fun.
If you enjoyed this content, please hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications.